Good morning. Buenos dias. Welcome to the first of our estimating webinars. This is Victoria Beal with the Ohio LTAP Center, and we're very pleased to be hosting these training sessions in conjunction with the Office of Diversity and Inclusion and the larger Division of Diversity Inclusion, and specifically the Supportive Services Program. Micah Flanagan will be speaking with you in a moment. I'm going to give you some housekeeping items and then we'll get rolling. First off, I would like to welcome you to the training and let you know that the handouts are available for you. We have two items in the handout panel. One is the actual PowerPoint that'll be used both today and tomorrow. And then we have a document with links to the 12 different handouts in there. Hopefully you have received this document already via email. If you registered this morning, you probably didn't because I sent it out last night. But it does contain links to where we have posted those documents on our website. And it would be helpful for you to have those for today and tomorrow. So if you have a moment, I would download at least the document with the links to the handouts and go ahead and get those downloaded to your PC. The other thing is we have a question box, and I see someone's already figured out where it's at because we have a question in there. But we do encourage you to put questions in the question box throughout the presentation this morning because we will be following up on those questions. And if we receive so many questions that we can't get to all of them, our presenter has said that he will be happy to address those questions first thing tomorrow morning in part 2 of the estimating training. Last but not least, we are attempting a recording of the training, and if it's successful, hopefully we'll be able to post that on our YouTube site and send a link out. But watching the recording does not get you credit. Only being on this webinar gets you credit. So we're happy that you're here. Micah, you have a few comments?
I just wanted to welcome everybody to the webinar. Usually we have these in person, but since the coronavirus has taken over, we decided to do webinars. So I'm really excited because I think we can hopefully offer more of these webinars in the future, but I hope everybody learns a lot. I know what you're going to learn is going to be great information, and you're going to have very knowledgeable presenters. So welcome to the webinar.
Great, thank you. All right, well, with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to today's presenter, who's Joe Lopez, and he is going to give you a quick background on himself and then launch into the training. Thanks, Joe.
Thank you, Victoria. Again, good morning. My name is Joe Lopez. I'm with our Tessa Building Group. I've been a general contractor for 32 years, so I know a little bit about construction, a little bit about estimating, a little bit about the entire field. So it's really an honor to present this on behalf of our Tessa Building Group, working in collaboration with ODOT and its leadership. These opportunities of sharing knowledge for myself and the other presenters is very valuable for the continuation and growth of your company. So as we have 2 days, today, the first day, we won't have any handouts, but they're all for tomorrow. I will tell you also that as you continue looking through today, I want you to post any questions you may have to our staff, and then we'll address those throughout the program. So let's get started. So if you see the first page, we're talking about estimating for construction. This is part 1. The first thing we talk about, what is an estimate? You know, most people take it for granted, but it really is a prediction of probable cost. When you think about it, it's figuring out how to put the pieces together in the most economical manner. The most economical manner for you needs to be interpreted by the buyer. So it's predictable and not random or by chance. So it's really a strategic calculation of pieces and parts, and how do you present that to the buyer? The buyer is going to be the owner. They're going to look at it, review it, and make a sound decision. So there's no guesstimating. I could tell you that ODOT and other sophisticated buyers spend weeks, months, and even sometimes years preparing an estimate that they have a budget. And they give us, the bidder, maybe 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks. So think about what we're talking about. They have the advantage of several weeks, months, and they have all the collaborators, whether they're engineers and architects and other buyers, preparing this documentation for estimating, which you have a small amount of time. So if there's a guesstimate, trust me, it'll flag, it'll surface, and everybody will know that you are not the trained professional that you should be as you preparing an estimate. We're going to page 2 here. We're talking about what is an estimate in the construction arena and why is it key to success. Truly is an introduction to opportunities. Just this morning, I personally at 5:30 this morning generated a proposal that had to be sent out, and it was to others that I never worked with. So it was an opportunity for me and my firm to expose who we are, what we do, because we looked at the bulletin board of opportunities. So part of that is really to seek those opportunities, identify if it is a skill set that you're qualified for. You want to track those so you know exactly if there was an addendum or if there's any other issues or concerns that apply to your proposal. You want to follow through and close out. The follow through is really important because not only when you are first informed and aware of the opportunity, there is some tracking, there's some follow through. And the follow through would be to make sure you have all the addendums, all the notes, all the correspondence, and the closeout. The closeout is so important because what it does, it actually finishes the project. It doesn't linger, and you could use it for future reference. If you're not successful, learn and retry. And we talk about this on a regular basis in our staff. We figure out why we were successful and why we weren't. And if you don't do that on both accounts, when you're successful and when I don't say you fail, but you weren't awarded a project, you have to learn from those things. Just to put it away and start with another project and not learning from that is a real mistake, because your asset of your time and money and energy and relationships is tossed out, and it's not recognized how to use it in the future. Remember the intentions of the owner or the buyer, what they're looking for. They're looking for a submission obligation of the bidder. The bidder, being you guys there, putting the estimates together, is what the buyer's going to look for. I wanted to ask for we have a poll to ask, and Victoria, if you could post that first question for the poll.
I'm happy to.
Thank you.
All right. And this is the Are You an Estimator?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. All right, I've got the poll question up. And people are answering. I usually wait for about 80% of the folks to vote before I take it down. It looks like you're getting a pretty good mix here, which is always nice to have in an audience, of both individuals who are brand new to it and people who do have experience. We're almost to 80%. As soon as we get over that, I will take the poll down and share the results with everyone. So if you haven't voted yet, vote quick, guys. We'll get there sooner. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close it. We're over 80 now. And I'm going to share the poll. So we have 38% that are not an estimator, 35% who are brand new to it, and we have 6% that are in the 1 to 2 year range. No one voted 2 to 3 years. And then we have 21% that are 3 or more years.
Perfect, thank you. Well, this really is a collection of from starters to seasoned veterans, which is perfect. So let's talk a little bit about what the bidder does and their responsibility. It truly is a lifeline for the company, the success of the company. You know, if you're going to be successful, if you're successful in bidding, it will sustain the company. It will create wealth or eliminate the firm from existence. I would tell you that most wealth is created by entrepreneurs. They're mostly small businesses, and they do create the wealth for themselves, for their families, and for generational. Or it'll put you out of business. All it takes is 1 or 2 bad bids where you're underbidded, you're awarded the project, and you suffer through the entire project. It does expose your weakness. And when we talk about a weakness, it's a weakness of like amongst your staff, among your skill sets, and you fail. And once you fail, it's very hard to create wealth. You know, your competitors know who you are. Just like today's experience, there were 9 bidders. Can tell you of those 9 bidders, if they all bid, they're going to know where they stack in the response. Most of these are public bids that are funded, so they're out there. You know, but what happens if you fail as a bidder? You do jeopardize relationships with existing owners and buyers. If you put a poor bid together, you're not recognized as being a someone that they want to work with, because it's just too difficult, too much of a hardship. The suppliers are challenged also because material suppliers usually don't vary their pricing. It's usually the same price for everyone, unless you are a better payer or you're a terrible payer. So it's reflective in your pricing, which means if you cannot buy in volume and that you're a poor payer, chances are the supplier is going to take that in consideration when they quote you. Your financial institutions are always at risk if you are a successful contractor, or if you're not, if you're a failing contractor or not so successful. The financial institutions, who should be your partners, understand that. Your subcontractors are jeopardized also. You can't always point your finger at the subcontractors that they're holding up the job or they're part of the problem. Your employees and the fate of the company are always jeopardized. How you win the jobs and why you win the jobs. Everyone wants to celebrate when they're successful. Everyone needs to, you know, take a closer look of why they weren't so successful, and it really is looking inward. You know, most projects are bonded, and for those that maybe do not know what a bond is for a project, is that when you're vulnerable for all the assets that you have. It could be all the company assets, it could be your personal assets, and you put everything on the line. Remember, bonding companies are insurance companies. They are the insurance to the owner to make sure that you're going to perform, that you're not going to walk away and stick the owner with a bad project because you have skin in the game. So let me ask the second question about how many of you, Micah, can we do this? Can we ask, number 2, how many are subcontractors or how many are suppliers that are online?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and put that up for you. It's Victoria.
Oh, Victoria, thank you.
No problem. All right, it's simple, yes or no. So as soon as we get over 80%, oh, that's just going quick. We'll be there in no time. All right, come on, guys. We need a few more votes. All right, we just got to 80. I'm going to close it and put it up. Sharing the results. You have 63% who voted yes and 38% who voted no.
Okay, and if you could post the third question, estimating art or science.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Now, let me address if you're a supplier. There's less at risk when you're a supplier bidding on a project. And the reason I say that is because you do have firm fixed cost and you don't have the risk of labor. Labor, and you'll see this throughout the presentation, is the most vulnerable and the most riskiest part of a contractor, of a subcontractor. So those that are suppliers, it's if you're doing a grade estimate, whether it's linear footage, square footage, cubic yard, etc., or by units, you could have skinnier margins and be successful because you eliminate the risk factor. So let's talk about the second, the third poll.
Yep. Do you see the results there?
No, I don't.
Okay, I will read them off to you. That's what I thought. On the third poll, we have 2% who voted for art, 9% who voted for science, and then the balance of them, 89% voted for both.
Well, we have a smart group there. 89% is correct. It really is a blend between the art and the science. The art is really being creative and thinking out of the box. What makes you more attractive, and what gives you the height of like insight? The science truly is the mathematical part, the components. So the buyers have a responsibility to have really used both of those things. Remember, the award is made to the best and most responsive bidders. Most buyers want to know why you thought, how and if you thought out of the box. How is that better for them as the owner? Are they minimizing risk, or are they taking a lot of risk? Is it something that they've never thought of it, or is it the same old type of business where you can't be creative? We don't know. But they want to minimize their risk, and they want the best results. Conversely, on the bidder's responsibility is to respond to RFP as offered. Don't take exceptions. Don't try to BS the buyer. Give them exactly what they're looking for. You know, are you responsive to what they're asking for? And they want to have the most attractive buyer. The most attractive buyer is really the best, less risk, best performing contractor, subcontractor, general contractor, or the bidder. They want to make sure when in an interview process, they're understanding delivering the project on time, under budget, and meets the specifications. Again, pretty simple. Give them what they want, or give them a voluntary alternate that is acceptable prior to the bid, so they can think about, like, that was a really great idea, and I think we could utilize it. We'll talk a little bit about the plan review. This is the bidder's responsibility. It truly is identifying all the facets in the project. It's everything that's on the drawings. It's everything that's on the specifications. It's everything that was an addendum. It's every note that came out. It's every conversation binds you to the project. So that's your responsibility. Identifying the risk to the buyer is important, but most important is to the bidder. Again, as I said earlier, the buyer has weeks and months and maybe even years, and that's their forte. They understand the building bridges, they're doing road work over and over and over and over. They're the experts. They are the experts. But you have a lot at risk. You're risking your assets, which is your labor. You know, are you going to use them on the project, or how does that impact where you're going to put them on another opportunity? The materials, if you use materials incorrectly or inappropriately, or wrong specifications, that's a problem. Your capital is always your cash, especially now when there is so much uncertainty. Obviously, the coronavirus has put risk and has really challenged a lot of subcontractors and suppliers. Your talent, obviously, if you're not successful, you will lose the talent. The plan and the information, the contingencies. I would always say, and I preach, if you don't have a backup plan, you don't have the first plan. And sometimes you need a third plan and a fourth plan. And that's the what if scenario. What if you underbid on one part of it? Can you make it up? You know, what's your plan? What's your contingency? If you don't have that, you truly will fail. The review of job costing. You know, if you win, are you successful? I would tell you that many public bid openings, you're the first guy to jump up because you won the bid, and then you find out that you're 20% lower than the second, third, and fourth, and fifth bidder. That was a short win. Now you're thinking, what did I do wrong? So you were happy at the beginning, but now you question yourself. A lot of times, the happiest days are the days that you win a project and the days that you close out the project. In between could be miserable if you don't have a great estimate. The contractors are not in the business of winning bids. We are only if there's profit to be made. If the contractor in business to make money, that's what really survives us. It lets us survive what we're doing today and what we're doing tomorrow. Great estimating will establish a good base for a company's success. I would tell you that if you know the successful companies, their estimating team is solid, it's seasoned, they're veterans. They know just by feel of the project, the scalability of it, and if your bid is complete and whole. If you take too many exceptions to the specifications or exclusions, a good estimator will interpret that from their subcontractors as being like there's no confidence there. Conversely, if you are the bidder and the buyer sees all these exclusions and clarifications, clarifications don't hurt you if you're not trying to switch a product. When we talk about the recipe for success, truly is about the skills that you have, the effort you put into it. And a lot of times we'll talk about the effort. I notice so many firms out there, smaller firms, are doing multiple things. They may be on a piece of equipment and estimating. They may be doing the HR and the administrative parts and estimating and working in the field. So the efforts of being a good estimator or winning projects is really a blend. You have to have good balance. There's software out there that will help you and contribute to your overall success. The software allows you to do multiple jobs at one time or bidding multiple projects at one time, because many times when you go through the interview process, an award from a buyer, they want all your notes, they want all your highlights, they want to make sure that you interpret it, you understand the job thoroughly, and the software for that. A lot of people will put their, in the old days, when I say old days, maybe 15 years ago, some of the estimators would put everything on a spreadsheet. It's an Excel spreadsheet. Sometimes it really was on loose leaf paper, where they're adding quantities and square footage and stuff like that, and they're adding them up with the tally. Sometimes they would even put a tape on it. With today's accounting software and estimating software, everything's electronic. If you needed to separate something or to buy it out, such like that, you can do it electronically so much easier, so much faster, and you can do the updates. Obviously, when there is a cost increase, it's pretty simple to change the formula and update your proposal. The talent to run that usually is very specific, and we'll talk a little bit later about some of the American Society of Professional Estimators that are out there, which is really a professional group of estimators that they have core principles, how to do their business, why it's important, and the standards that they live to. That's part of the resources. We're talking about cost trends, which is labor, materials, and equipment. This is a reviewing of the cost of your job costing.
Question.
Yes,
Sorry.
please.
We have a question in the chat pod. It says, what are some bidding software? And I asked that because they've asked it in the chat pod, but as a reminder to everyone, ODOT doesn't endorse any particular bidding software. But go ahead with the response.
I will send in the link. There's probably about 5 or 6 that I would recommend, and I'll put that at the end of tomorrow, if that's okay. So stay tuned for tomorrow, and I'll give you some of the bidding software. Now, you got to remember, the bidding software that's available right now is really specific in your deliverables, which if you're an electrical contractor, there's specific software that's for electrical contractors. For general contractors, it's more robust, it's very detailed, and the same thing there. Now, you could take some of this software and utilize it, but it's only as good as your skill set of understanding and how to plug it in. That's what I said a little bit earlier. If you have an opportunity to use CAD or SketchUp or stuff like that to understand how to highlight, then when you do your submission, you're highlighting where you're at, what you're doing, and there is a comprehension that you are sharing with the buyer. Normally, you could give them a quantities if it goes to that second part of the interview. Yes, you could share quantities, so because a good buyer will ask you to justify square footages, linear footage, building scope, etc., like that. The more that you have on your proposal, the better interpretation from the buyer, the more comfort they have, and the more likely you are to be successful. But I'll give you some software recommendations. Again, not recommendations, availability that you should consider. Okay. So we talked a little bit about the labor, materials, and equipment. Some of the cost trends, and I always talk about this, the labor. Certain projects are unions, certain projects are prevailing wage, certain projects are open, certain projects are taxable, some are non-taxable. You really need to consider that when you're doing your labor and you're estimating. Materials, you gotta be very sensitive to this. Obviously, when we have an embargo or if we have crucial shortages, prices goes up, and you gotta consider that. You know, if anyone bought gas or fuel in the last couple of weeks, I mean, it's down to like $1.20 a gallon in some locations. Well, you know, if you have that in your proposal and the prices goes down, it's better for you. If it goes the opposite way, then it should come out of your contingency. One thing that people never consider, and they should, is equipment rental. And I talk about this, and we actually execute it in-house. Those that owned equipment will always be more competitive. And I tell you the reason, one of the reasons why. If you have to rent equipment and it sits idle on a job site for one reason or another, because of a unpredictable weather change, whether it's raining or snow and stuff like that, and you're paying, you know, every 4 weeks, there's an invoice for rented equipment. It adds up. For those that own their own equipment, and if it rains or snows or inclement weather, they're not paying out of pocket for that. They already own it. So equipment, if you could justify it and you're successful, when you are successful, an investment in equipment, you'll be miles ahead. You know, we also talk about the hourly, to have a mixed group of hourly, whether it's prevailing wage or union or seasoned veterans and those apprentices and pre-apprentices. That's important. The unit is how you blend these things and what production is in your assemblies. I'll talk a little bit about units. The units we talk about and assemblies, they actually go together. In the past, and this is on vertical construction, and when your people were building high rises or mid rises, and whether it's hotel or a hospital, everyone that was doing, let's talk about plumbing. Everybody would go out there and they do the same old traditional way of doing it. They weren't thinking out of the box, which means that they would run their supply lines, their waste lines, piece by piece by piece. Those that thought out of the box would do all those assemblies in their shop because they knew that they were stackable. And then they would take them out and they would reduce their hours in the field and make those assemblies work. That was thinking out of the box. Now it's practiced on a regular basis. They do the same thing in hospitals where they do head walls. Same thing there. They used to do it over and over the same old slow way, but that was the only way they knew. Now they're doing head walls in shops. They send them out there and install them, moving on. So you had to think about the assemblies and how can you minimize your hours in the field. Your competition, once they learn how you're doing it, you'll be copied, and you have to continue thinking out of the box. So what we talked about earlier is about on your bidding. You have to keep that private, keep it to yourself, because that is the only advantage you have. You really need to organize your team. You should have really an estimating leader. The estimating leader is the quarterback. It will orchestrate your subordinates. The subordinates can be anyone from, in the past, we used to grab the fact sheets and send out the invitations. Now we have some similar. Our subordinates are sending out the broadcast, collecting that information, logging them, tagging them, seeing if they're complete, having all the information, assembling the minority business enterprises or the edge firms, et cetera, like that. That is required sometimes, but mostly embraced by some of the buyers, whether it's ODOT or others. You know, we want to have diversity. We want to have new firms. We want to have edge firms, etc. So subordinates can categorize those. We're talking about the suppliers. They could also gather the suppliers or send out the suppliers information, whether it's an addendum or adjustment or quantities. And the subcontractors need to be informed. As you do that, you really need to review the cost. The cost of those pieces and parts is what's going to make you successful. If someone is missing something and you accepted that proposal and thought it was 100% and you posted it and it wasn't everything and you were under the impression that it was, you end up buying what was missing. Could be very costly. Here's some of the review of job costing. On the left-hand side, you will see a spreadsheet. Now, this is a pretty detailed spreadsheet, and this is what we're talking about, some software. So when you look at it, it talks about all the sections and all the subsections. You can put in there is the numbers, the unit costs or quantities. It'll actually do its own math. It'll extend it to the cost. You can put your buyer in there and your total and the subtotal. This kind of software that's used for estimating is invaluable. It certainly beats your legal pad and your Excel spreadsheet, because now you can categorize it. The more you use this, the better you're going to know where your costs can be when you buy it out also, because now you use this information and you say, well, this was my projection, what was my actuals? And having that information to identify the deltas would always keep you better in tune and fine tuned as you go forward. So when we talk about
Joe?
job costing, go ahead.
This is Victoria. I just want to jump in real quick and remind everyone, if you have questions, please feel free to put them in the question pod. I feel like folks may not have had enough coffee yet this morning, but we're happy to take questions that you have. So please put them in there and I'll be happy to read those off to Joe. So we're like halfway through right now, and we're happy to make certain that we get your questions answered. Thanks.
Thank you, Victoria. Well, I'm jacked up for my coffee from 5 o'clock, so there. Let's talk about the depository for the company. That you should always know who your competitors are bidding the jobs. You should know all your costs, all the conditions that you need to consider, and all information should be protected. I cannot stress how important to keep your information personal, protected. Many times in a war room, and we work with some very large contractors, of some of you have also, is that information goes in that room. There's people always bringing information, but they're never taking anything out until the bid is complete. And once that's complete, that bid, then that is a job file that is also protected for future. You have to examine it and review against the ATF. The ATF is after the fact. So you have to examine it. How did you do? What were your speculations? What were you thinking? What was your facts? And how do you use that in the future? We talk about profits. Oh, sorry. Review in detail. I think we have another poll.
Okay, I'll get that put up for you.
That's number 4.
And it's, have you ever had a third-party estimator assist you? Is that the one you want?
Yes, thank you, Victoria.
Okay. Uh-huh. All right, you guys, you know the rule. You got to keep voting until we get over 80%. So wait, we check to make sure you're still awake too. Tomorrow morning, everybody has to promise to drink more coffee before they get on here. All right, we're up over 80%.
So what's the results?
We have 10% that voted yes and 90% that voted no.
All right, let me discuss this with the 90%ers. There are organizations and talent that you should and could utilize to review your proposals and your estimate. There are professional estimators, there are professional organizations, and we have those listed. The American Society of Professional Estimators is just one of them. As I said before, the buyer has weeks or months or even a year or longer to put these proposals together. Actually, to put the proposal and the estimate and the scope out. You have 2 or 3 weeks. Good luck if you're growing in certain areas that you're not so familiar with. You know, you're at risk. Risk is dangerous. So to bring a professional estimator in to assist is actually something you should consider, could consider. You also want to use all the talent that you have under your roof. It could be project engineers, project superintendents. They'll know what the burn rates are in the field. They'll understand how hard the guys are working, or the people are working, because there's women in the field also. So you want to understand that. Are they taking it easy because they don't have another job? Are they milking it? Or they're working really hard because it's the culture? Now we talk about profits. So the profits that we're talking about is that, you know, it's really correlated to the risk of the opportunity. Obviously, We talked about this also earlier. Materials are low risk as long as the quantities are correct. The labor is the highest. And the labor is the highest because sometimes when you have to bring on additional labor, you don't know what the skill sets are, you don't know what the burn rates are at. You know, you may say, hey, I have 4 people here and I know exactly how much work these 4 people can do. We want to speed up this job. We're going to bring another 3 or 4 people that are maybe unknown. You estimated that they were going to do the same as your core group. They don't do it. That's why it's risky. Subcontractors, condition low risk. And the reason it's low risk is because downstream has contracts, and those contracts should be binding to you and to you upstream to the owner. And that's where the subcontractor is in check. You push the risk downstream to the subcontractors. The general expenses are no risk or low risk. That is your traditional overhead. You already know what you're paying for rent. You already know all those expenses in our office and administratively. So that's a low risk. We talked a little bit about where your profits should be. Your expertise in one's own silo, that's a low risk. If you can self-perform something, you don't have to buy it out. That's low risk because you already know what you can produce. So again, but conversely, if you're so busy that you have to use another service of the subcontractor, the risk goes up a little bit to the subcontractor level. We're talking about profits. We're talking about estimating for profits. Good estimating minimizes the contractor risk and facilitates project management and defines the scope of work. Typically what happens when you're successful and you win a job, you should be able to turn or to actually transfer that knowledge that you've put forth in your assets of that estimating to your project team. You need to share everything. There's the handoff. That handoff is so important. You need to share why you may have a certain number. Did you cut a deal with someone? Did you have a different source? Is it stuff that you already had in your inventory and you didn't have to count it versus a guy that takes on project managers and buys everything and you have extra inventory? It's that kind of handoff that you need to educate the project management team. Remember, the estimate is a roadmap that furnishes the company and its field personnel with all the details in a controlled and prearranged format. When we talk about that, is that all projects are built with a baseline, and that baseline truly is how the job is built and how it's bid and why it's that way. It's a roadmap for the company knows what they need to do. Consistent products will keep you in business for generations. Earlier I was talking about ODOT. ODOT is a great buyer and a great entity. If you think about, they do approximately $1.5 billion worth of work. If you're a consistent winner and a successful bidder, I never say low bidder, successful bidder, that's generational, because the more you do it, the better you're at, the more productive you're going to get, the more recognized you are, and actually the more sought out that you are also. But you need to have profits or else you'll never grow. Understand all of your cost. You really need to know this. You can't say oops or other words to say, oh my God, I missed something. Well, you have to learn from that, and you need to fix it now, and you need to highlight it and share with others that how you need to overcome that. Again, you need to review, analyze, and forecast costs against the profits. Again, it's tracking. Whatever you justified in your proposal, you need to track that. Are you hitting your goals? Are you hitting your numbers? Are you hitting your productivity? We'll talk a little bit about blueprints of construction. Once again, we're just showing the site improvement. This is a typical, similar to ODOT civil drawings. You need to file, track, and save or destroy. Again, if you're doing things on a regular basis and it's in your scope of work, and it's what you do on a repeated basis, you really need to file that information. And we'll go into this tomorrow. We'll tell you how there's 187 pages. We'll tell you where your competitors are at. And you need to use that information. We'll discuss that tomorrow. But
We have a
you follow
question for you.
please.
It says, what is the best way to get the information from the bid to the field? Information seems to get lost.
Well, I would say is that what we've always practiced, what good practices are, is that you really need to have that handoff. You have to take that estimator and get them involved with the project management team. You have to. If you just hand over the estimated package and say, all right, go build it, and never have that shared information, here's what happens. That estimator is grinding through details. As long as they're qualified to do that, they're going to have pieces and parts, they're going to have spreadsheets, they're going to have a list of materials, they're going to have who their vendor was for their rental equipment, et cetera, because they have to build the project. Now, you take that information and you share it with the project manager. The project manager can also be a superintendent, but someone needs to know what the resources are at, because the estimator is moving on to another project, but he already has the skill sets and the knowledge to transfer that. If it doesn't go into the field, then you got communication issues. And then you have to have a kickoff meeting in-house before you start the project. There are times that you have to generate purchase orders and stuff like that. Now, is the estimator doing the purchase orders, or are they doing it in collaboration with the project management team? Or are they doing it just with administrator? I think you need to have all three parties. You need to have the estimator, you got to have the administration, which is the purchase order people, the administrators that are doing the cost, and you need to have the field transition team. So if you don't have it, that's really communication. You need to fix that. I hope that helps. But afterwards, if there's any questions, please go ahead.
Sure. I'm a DBE and I must own my equipment. What's the best way to get started?
To own your equipment?
Yes, they said they must own their equipment. What's the best way to get started?
One piece at a time. Rent to purchase is one way. Used equipment. I'm gonna tell you, there are plenty of contractors that go belly up. If you can buy your equipment used or make a payment plan, is probably the best way. I hope that helps. And I'm sorry if I talked so fast, but I really get excited about construction. It's in my blood. We'll talk a little bit about the acknowledgements. Acknowledgements are basically when someone is sharing more information. It's like an addendum. Addendum is a change to the existing drawings, which you need to review, and you need to acknowledge that you recognize those, and that's what the addendum does. RFIs are requests for information that any bidder will generate for clarifications. So those RFIs are part of the contract, and it's assumed that you recognize that and you know the change. And we talk a little bit about the opportunities of the career and the cycle of the construction. It really starts with the invitation, goes through any reiterations of modified drawings, through addendums, through RFIs, to pre-award and award and contractual. That entire cycle is part of the contract and should be part of the file, to the closeout. Closeout, and I always say, start doing your closeout as soon as you get the contract. You can do a lot of that stuff. You could do all the warranty information. You can do a lot of submittal pieces and parts. The safety stuff, you start right from the beginning before you get on job site. Make sure that you have your 30-hour OSHA. I mean, as soon as you're awarded, get that stuff done. Prepare yourself for the closeout, because it will impact your final distribution retainage. Submitting your bids, it should be confidential and complete. We talked about this before. The confidential part is probably the key. I would never share my bids with someone else, a competitor, or after the fact, unless it was an employee or stakeholder. That's your asset, and you wouldn't jeopardize putting it at risk or expose it to anyone else. Nor would you do that with a credit card or your bank account or your wallet. Keep it to yourself. The way to put your bids together is to have the support of your staff. And the collateral we talk about is all of the information that you generated in putting together your proposal. It would be data, specs, proposals, quotations, downstream. That has to be reviewed by your team and also by the estimating team, which actually should share this again with the owner or the project management team. I think to have an estimator share with the project management team makes a lot of sense because they're going to have dialogue and they're going to talk about why they should avoid this project or avoid using a certain subcontractor or one thing or another. The estimator sometimes has a disconnect between what he's doing and actually the field operations. So that's where you're having the owner and the estimating team work together. Your finance individual, which is your bank or in-house, should understand how that impacts your cash flow and your project. And then also the management. We don't talk enough about finance, but I would tell you that the finance with your insurance company and your bonding company and your banker and your accounting department is really impactful when it comes to payroll and paying your invoices on time, etc. This is one of my favorite slides. It's a struggle to win. I don't care if you started, those that are less than a year and those that are over 5 years. It is a struggle to win because there's new competitors on a regular basis coming into the market. There's some that are going out of business, but you need to utilize all your skills, your experience, your assets, and your talent. And I mean that sincerely. If those think that you're better, if you are the estimator, you're better than anyone else in a company, I think you fail. And if you own a company and think that you're better than all your other players, I think you fail again. It really should be a culture of the company assets and personnel that make you successful. We'll all struggle and then we win. We struggle because we learn. And from that learning, we become better. We're going to wrap this thing up in about 10, 15 minutes. The negotiation award, a thorough estimate is your key to success. So you have to have your base bid, your alternates. Voluntary alternates really are important. And if you have the opportunity, it shows the buyer that you're thinking out of the box or there's a better mousetrap. So you need to consider that. The bid should demonstrate that you're mathematically sound, as we talked about earlier. You have to have your quantities correct. You have to have all the components. You have to have a thorough understanding. The estimator should be part of the interview process with the buyer. You shouldn't go as a project manager or the owner when the estimator did all the work. You need to be part of that negotiations to demonstrate their understanding. They're going to look for, the buyers will look for what is the best firm of choice. They need to have comfort that you are the right choice. It's selection. Remember, it's in every bid, it doesn't say lowest bid, it says best qualified. Here's the other thing also, I want you guys to understand this, is that don't be fooled by the buyer. There are buyers that are motivated by spending the least amount of money on a project, may not have the right contractor, but they're motivated, and so don't be fooled by them. Make sure that you hold your numbers, that you understand your numbers, and if you can't get to the number that the buyer wants, you may have to pass. Not having a job that is at your be at your cost or below is a job that you don't want. Change orders are very important. We're going to talk about who issued them. Was it the owner or the bidder? Some change orders are for unknown and unforeseen conditions. You need to know that also. But you need to have those numbers readily available. If you have suspect that you may be able to make more money on a change order than on your base bid, you should review the bid documents. Some bid documents will limit you on change orders, whether it's 5% or 10%, whatever it may be. You need to know that. And the reason I say that, it may be lower than your original bid submission.
Joe,
If you're a yes.
there's a question that's come into the pod. I don't know if you want to answer this now or first thing tomorrow morning, but it says you mentioned closeout. How is the bid part of that process, and what is that process?
That's a great question. I'll answer it now. A closeout is, a lot of times on a closeout, there is a laundry list of documents or information that needs to be done when you close out the project. And you'll know that in your bid specs and also in your general conditions and general requirements. They may be, I want a warranty, a workmanship warranty, I want a material warranty, I want to make sure your insurance is in place, all those things there. Those are the, I may need as-built drawings. That is part of the closeout. So you may think that you're done with the project and there's a retainage. And the retainage of most projects are really part of your profit, include your profit in it, right? So if you linger and don't supply that to the owner, you may be waiting a lot longer, and that's your profit. That's what sustains you to go to the next project. There are, as a contractor, and you have subcontractors, the subcontractors need to generate their closeout documents also. Whether, again, it's warranty, OSHA, whatever it may be, there's a whole list, and we can review those tomorrow if you want to, or I could send them to you later. But they're usually in the general requirements and general conditions. We'll talk a little bit, I hope that helped you. We'll talk about some of the margins. The margins sometimes are a little bit lower on change orders than they are in a regular bid. So you don't want to generate change orders if it's going to impact you negatively. The impact of change orders typically are the duration, are going to be there longer. Hopefully you could justify that in your change order proposal pricing. It's the resources. Are you going to use more people, more equipment? Are you using a line of credit? Those are part of the impact of a change order. Does it impact your finances? Are you extending your credit line to the max? And other projects, if you're committed all your personnel on one project and it's extended for any one reason, how does that impact the next project? Because it's predecessors and successors when it comes into construction, on the project themselves and also within the projects. This is one of my favorite slides. We talked about common mistakes. And we don't have a poll for this, but I'm going to go through them. Here's something that most younger, inexperienced firms or suppliers or estimators have a problem with. They cut their prices to beat a rival contractor. That's a kiss of death, because you don't know what's there, how they're doing it, why they're doing it a certain way. But you say, you know, every time I go up this individual, this firm, I always lose. So I'm going to do it at whatever it is, 0%, 2%, just because I need the work. That's a problem for you. Underestimating the complexity of the project. Now, if you think that you're using a square footage price versus a unit cost, or really looking at the drawings, on that complexity will impact your duration of the project and also your assets. Expecting an excessive amount of favorable conditions and change orders. Again, don't count on change orders for profit. That should be a standalone. Overemphasize the volume purchasing of a kind owner. That's when the owner says, hey, listen, I'll do this for me at cost and I'll catch up with you on the next project. That's a bad way of doing business. That next project never comes when you need it. Contracting with an incomplete bid, self-explanatory. You left something out and now you're trying to catch up. Scale and drawings. This is one of the commandments also. Do not ever scale drawings. If it's not on the drawings, it's not on specifications, RFI it. Too many people have made mistakes scaling drawings. They don't understand what they're looking at. or they can't quantify. If you can't quantify by the owner, the documents, then RFI it. Utilizing unproven subs or suppliers. I would say never do that, but if you have to, try to back bond it. The back bond of a subcontractor puts all the risk to the subcontractor. That will eliminate anyone walking off the job because they made a mistake and they feel that it's better for them to abandon the project than continue. No unit costing, it goes both ways. It's from downstream and upstream. If you don't have the unit costing downstream from your suppliers or subcontractors, then you won't be able to interpret it into your spreadsheet and send it upstream. Not accounting for cost increases. We talked about this earlier. If you did not account for it, whether it's a wage increase or a product increase, and didn't put it in your contingency or didn't clarify it in your proposal, then you're at risk. You can clarify cost increases upstream to the buyer. But say, hey, listen, you could hold this for 30 days or 40 days or whatever it may be. After that, it's subject to increases because you don't know some of the commodity items. You know, one time drywall went super high, steel went super high, electrical went high because copper went up and aluminum. So you need to qualify that in your proposal to minimize your cost increases or at least to capture the cost increases. Here's another common mistake is cost of slow pay. You know, in Ohio, we have a 10-day quick pay. You need to use that to your advantage. What I mean by advantage is that don't take it for granted you're gonna get paid when upstream contractor gets paid. You need to get paid on time. Slow pay really will burden the company. Production rates, calculating the labor rates is accurate. Again, when you have increases or you didn't account for the increases and it's a long project, whether it's a year or 2 years, you can be making up the delta of the shortfall. The takeoff emissions, again, you missed part of the scope. That's why having someone else look at the project, look at your estimate is so important. Missing quotes and guesstimate open items. This happens when you didn't know it, you didn't do it early enough, or you know, people go to their easy items first. I say go to the tough items first because that's the things that you need to learn about, and usually get those suppliers, subcontractors in line first. They may be such a niche company that they're busy, so you need to address those first and not guesstimate it. Crumbling under pressure to procure work. This has happened so often where the superintendent did not review the estimate and says, I need it now. Go down the street and get it from the hardware store, go for the big box store, and it's probably not the best value. So don't be in a hurry, plan your job, work your job. Again, you didn't utilize your estimate review procedures, and that means you could have been paying taxes where you could avoid taxes or one thing or another. So just have a procedure in place, have purchase orders so you could tie it back into the estimate. Not updating materials pricing or trucking costs. I think we talked about it earlier. I can tell you that now because this coronavirus, trucking companies are not as timely as they used to be. So they're trying to consolidate a lot of materials and ship it at one time versus you know, they're trying to get a full load or 3/4 of a load and not deadhead. So that does impact your projects, and you have to worry about how that impacts your overall bottom line. Again, not communicating with suppliers and thinking that they will not impact you. Suppliers go out of business, they raise their prices. Supply and demand, you just need to be in touch with them or obligate them to your purchase. Estimating department is not disciplined in their sole responsibilities. I think we talked about it before, when the person is not only running the work, estimating the job, and also is a coach, right? Is coach in Little League or one thing or another. Estimators have to be very disciplined. So that kind of concludes our part one. The rest of the materials that we have here will be shared tomorrow, and hopefully if there are any questions that you could send them Victoria, you take those questions and we could address them this afternoon for tomorrow. And I want to
That sounds,
thank you for the opportunity. It's been really great. Again, I had to slow down a little bit, but I had coffee for everybody, I think.
there you go. Well, we appreciate you getting it done right at 10 o'clock. We're going to be respectful of everybody's time, and we do have some questions for you to answer to start off with tomorrow morning. So thank you so much, Joe, and to Luis, who is there in the background running the PowerPoint. And please feel free to also email in questions if you have them. I'll be sending out a follow-up email with the attachments. Everyone have a great rest of your day. Take care.
Be safe.